This is George Lees talking to John Patterson on the 27th of July 2014, and I believe what we're going to talk about today is the newly elected commissioners for the police force and the undermining of funding of local policing all across the UK and the stress burden that that is causing for law enforcement from Land's End to John O'Groats. Do you want to start, John, by telling a little bit about the history of the elected officers, or shall I do that?
I'll leave that with you, please, George, while I finish.
Okay. You must not speak with your mouth full.
I know, I'm sorry.
So, in 2011, I became aware of at the tail end of 2010, when the new government came in, and they had already announced that the Treasury was empty. Gordon Brown left a message on the Prime Minister's desk saying, gleefully, "We have emptied the Treasury, so your regime has no chance of fulfilling its electoral pledges." Within the same fortnight, David Laws was brought in to renegotiate the coalition agreement, and what he did as a former executive with JP Morgan, the bank, the massive bank, the manipulative bank, and with previous as an executive at Barclays, within months of the shenanigans involving Bob Diamond, and the defection with all of his bonuses and all of his pension funds and all of his links to Boris Johnson and the Barclay bikes, all of it was never exposed to law enforcement. But the police are now being told by a woman called Zoe Billingham, who's the boss at Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary, or is their official spokesman. She appeared on Radio 4 this very week, I believe it was Monday or Tuesday of this week, and she announced that the cuts in police funding were totally justified. Now, I'll tell you a little bit about Billingham and her family's sins later on, and John's got some shocking facts to add on that, involving some of England and the UK's most left-wing politicians. Those are the guys that stand for sharing, for low taxation, and for heavy taxation on the elites in this country. In other words, the Labour Party that became the new Labour Party when we entered into the conflict with Iraq and those innocent nations overseas. Anyway, I got interested in the elected police commissioner concept when I learned that lefty John Prescott, from a notoriously socialistic family, his dad was almost a revolutionary, a bit like the Miliband parents from Lithuania. Yeah, and John Prescott was to run to be an elected commissioner for the police, and that was announced the year that New Labour lost power to the coalition government, where the renegotiated coalition agreement meant that what was going to happen, because it was conducted and negotiated by a banking executive, was that the new cabinet was intent in stripping the funds from the Treasury and putting into private accounts all around the world, as you've heard from Professor George Lees and Gordon Bowden in previous interviews. The methods are simple. They were used to crash the banks in 2008, and they're now being used on an hourly basis in electronic transactions that strip out all of our tax revenues and all of our Treasury revenues and all of the issuance of the money from the Bank of England, and they launder it into the IMF and into private accounts in distant lands, where we engage in massive geopolitical manipulation of the type that we talked about, involving the Fleming family, who are the Bond authors, and involving Lord Markham of Ukraine, Henry Kissinger, who's on the Future of Russia Foundation, with the Rothschilds, and with some of the royals. Yeah, it is absolutely obscene, the manipulation that goes on.
George, you know what I'd like to do now, mate, before they drop me out again?
Just keep to the policing issues.
Listen, I'd like to keep this to a 12-minute video so that I've got it saved.
Okay, so do you want to talk about your...
George, let me finish, please.
Yeah.
Then we can attach the full interview in the link. So I'm going to sign this off now before they drop me out. Okay?
Alright, okay, I'll just I'll do a longer one.
Exactly. I'll speak to you soon.
So shall I introduce them to Billingham?
Yes, George, I'm going to close this off now before they shut me down, mate.
Okay.
And then I'll come back to you. We can add the full interview at the bottom of this.
Right.
Speak to you soon.
Okay. In the end, because of the pressure on John Prescott, he was not able to run. He dropped out. This is around the same time that they were being compensated by the Leveson Commission, and I've explained to the listening public that Leveson is directly related to the elites that sent the colonists to the colonies for stealing bread 200 years ago. Yeah? So John Prescott did not have the courage, in the face of honest investigative journalists, to stand for police commissioner. We attacked him and he stood down. He did not run. But Zoe Billingham represents a police regulatory authority, and when you look at the Inspectorate that they have elected, it's quite shocking how much bureaucracy is being funded, but the police funding is being neglected. Until the police themselves, the people who are still on the beat, still working locally, trying to feed their families despite a 5-year... Are you online yet, John?
I'm just saving this video, George, and I'll be right back.
Alright. So Zoe appeared on the radio the other morning and she said, like this...
Okay. Hi George, I'm back now, so I'm recording from here. Just in case, you know, that first part is saved. Okay, so this is John Patterson and George Lees talking about the undermining of police funding in the UK. Okay, Zoe Billingham appeared earlier this week to say that there was no money left to spend on policing, and that was why every time they get the opportunity they are reducing the number of police who are employed, and they are making them work longer and longer shifts. And I talked to a policewoman in my local region, and she said, she confirmed that she was deployed on the UN riots in London, and that on issues like that, or like the Commonwealth Games that are here this week, even although G4S have a massive contract for the Glasgow Commonwealth Games, the police get worked to the eyeballs. They are absolutely fatigued when they return home after a 13-hour shift. One of them has to drive home after a 13-hour shift. Yeah, so they're breaching their own health and safety clauses because there's no money to pay others to do the same job or to share the job. Okay, so Zoe Billingham is the official spokesperson for that. And do you want to talk about what you learned about her relatives yesterday, John, or do you want me to tell her the world something about her money laundering activities, which is why there is no money left in the Treasury? Well, yes, that's a good idea, George, and we know who her mother is, the Baroness.
Yeah. Yep. So when I began to look at our directorial registrations the other day, there are 5 hits, and it's very, very difficult. All of them are Zoe Billingham's. All of them have different middle initials.
Yep.
And it's very, very difficult to know for sure that this is the same person. But one of them is tied to the Tottenham Citizens Advice Bureau. And the things I've learned about the Citizens Advice Bureau and its running and the legal presence that works allegedly voluntarily there but are listed as directors, who are also involved in money laundering scams north of the border. And we talked a lot about the advisors to the British government on law enforcement, Naismith and Stuart Fair the other day, and how they're involved in massive schemes using the Prime Minister's boiler rooms in Finchley to get to cover their tax bills, to render themselves immune from taxation, on £250 an hour job, and none of that is enforced by the British Business Directory or the Vince Cable at the DTI. All of it happens through the Law Society and affiliated associations like that. Learned and august societies that are working on behalf of their members, but are also emptying the Treasury, which is leading to the closure of rural law courts even as we speak. Yet they're tumbling all over the country for lack of funds in the public sector. So Zoe was just singing out that theme, but when you see the list of her companies, and I'm going to publish it in due course, and I'll cite in the follow-up to this video the listings and the implications of those directorial registrations and the massive laundering schemes that are used to take the money out of UK coffers and to put it somewhere abroad, in the Caymans or in the Philippines or in Geneva. Yeah, the same things that Gordon and I talk about all the time. So John got really interested in the elected official thing because he thought he was a contact. Who was the name? Oh, maybe you don't want to dub on your friend who failed to win the Commissioners' vote in East Sussex. You don't want to reveal him?
Not at this stage, George.
But you can reveal that Katie Bourne was a successful candidate.
Yep.
And I can reveal that I've had a look at Gordon Bowden in Derby. Gordon Bowden is the world's most informed man on financial fraud, and he cannot find a vent to take those massive frauds to law. So I was trying to tell him that he has an opportunity in his own area because of the election of that local representative. I can't remember the chap's name, but I will put it in the text at a later date, and I'll put it in the keywords. But when you look at the Derby elected Commissioner's office, you learn that the man there that is Gordon's representative, just making sure that his overworked police, who will not forward any of Gordon's claims to law enforcement, particularly on fraud and on war crimes, and on allowing people to flee from that catchment into Latin America because they were privy to the secrets on the issuance of passports to get people out of this country, and also on the issuance of arms to various people in the Arms to Iraq scandal, but also her deep knowledge of the paedophilia scandals that gets the politicians picked for power in the first place. That's Andrea Davidson. But what I want to turn the public's attention to now, and the police officers' attention to, is how much their funding is being undermined by bureaucrats. So Gordon's elected official does not earn as much as Miss Bourne in John's region. You allege that she earned £100,000 basic?
Up to. That was
okay.
a couple of years ago.
Okay. So in Gordon's case,
between 85 and 100.
In Gordon's case, the top man gets 70 grand. He's also got a CEO within the commission who gets 66 grand or something like that. You can look it up when I reveal the name of the person. But they've got an office totally dedicated to bureaucracy that was not in place in 2010 before we elected the busted government, that is burning off over £50,000 salaries for teams that are 8 to 10 strong. And then when you learn that their boss and their regulator, i.e. Her Majesty's Inspectorate Constabulary, which covers Northern Ireland, the Isle of Man, ironically, the famous tax haven, and the whole of the UK, you begin to worry about why the statement was made by Gordon Brown that the Treasury was empty after 4 years in office. Is it 4 years or 5 years for the UK Parliament?
4 years.
4 years. Okay. And what we are now led to believe is that the Treasury is again in an insolvent state, which is why the police jobs are tumbling, and which is why the pensions are tumbling. I want to make another video later today about British Telecom pensions and the toxic debt in all of the busted banks, who are actually used as directors on the British Telecom pension fund. It is vicious. It is stealing from the people. It is imposing on all civil servants and public sector workers a 5-year-long pay freeze, when the new commissioner that used to be a local councillor in a relatively low-life position is now earning his, you know, a 6-figure salary.
George, if you wanted to keep this to a 10-minute video, it will have a larger impact.
Did you learn more about, did you want to put the thing into this? I'm quite happy with you. We're getting 700 hits for every 30-minute video that we make, and if you press the forward bar, what's the big bar at the bottom of your keyboard? I mean, what's happening is that your screensaver is kicking in, or you're getting over the 15-minute limit. But to overcome that, you just need to keep pressing.
No, it's not that, George. I can record an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours. But the thing is, as soon as people see an hour and a half, 2 hours...
Yeah, well, we don't need to do that. But all I want you to do is to tell them something about Katie Bourne. But what I want you to do in the same coordinated theme, because it doesn't make sense to break it up into 10-minute jobs that don't hang together.
No, yeah? Well, I'll leave it going, George.
Okay. So
that first part...
So can you tell me the shocking news that you told me yesterday morning about Zoe Billingham's relatives and how they are lefties, in inverted commas, in the new Labour movement, and they are household names already?
Well, the mothers are...
And is this potentially a different Billingham and a different Skinner? Because if so, you need to reveal that now.
Okay. Her mother, Zoe's mother, is Baroness Billingham.
That shocked me already.
Now Zoe...
And that's for sure. That is published somewhere?
So it's on Wikipedia.
Excellent. It's good. So there's no uncertainty there.
So Dennis Skinner, who is the son of Dennis Skinner, the MP. Hello?
So Dennis Skinner is Zoe's grandpa. Is that...
No. Yes.
Yes.
Exactly.
And his son is a Knight of the Realm.
There you go.
Is that true?
Yep. It's like, George, it's even on Wikipedia. I don't know how long it's going to be on there.
Well, that's amazing, because Dennis Skinner, as the listeners will know, is the infamous or the legendary Beast of Bolsover. He's supposed to be the last innocent Democrat and the voice of decency in that new Labour Party that committed the genocide and killed the 2 million that we talked about yesterday, as was written on Brian Hawes' t-shirt. Yeah, that is the same regime that killed David Kelly, the same regime that killed Robin Cook, just so that that Tony Blair and George W. Bush could have their way. And we've made multiple videos about Blair's connection to money laundering and massive international fraud, and with the Bush Overby scandal and the ties to Bill Gamble, to Fetty's school, to Fetty's where the Scottish police are trained. You know, the whole thing is just a ruthless theft project, and the first people that need to know that are the local police, who are working selflessly for no pension at all. When the BT staff that allow them to monitor our conversations and intel to profit from it and launder the money out of the country learn that their pensions are regulated by the same busted banks.
Well, I can tell you now, George, there's at least 6 local police in my area who know everything. Okay?
Yeah.
And I would have thought, since I spoke to them, that would have been burned and copied, and it's going around all the police force as we speak. So
what did you tell me when you announced that Zoe was related to Baroness Billingham? You told me a more explicit story than the one that you've just relayed, just that they were related. What is the involvement of the Baroness with the police force or its, you know, bureaucratic extensions nowadays?
No, this was something to do. She was involved in the MP's expense scandal with the rest of them.
Okay. And I'm just trying to see if I can find Gordon Bowden's elected representative, because I found it the other day and I was quite stunned by how big his office and his followers were, or his, you know, staff team.
I mean, I get, you know, people just don't seem to understand how powerful they are. Because, you know, I've got 1,700 emails now. Someone said to me, well, how can I find out if my MP wasn't one of the ones that signed this petition, you know, into the paedophile investigation inside number 10?
Yeah.
I said, well, if he's your local MP, just ask him. And you'll know by his response whether you can trust him. I mean, it's that simple. All people have to do is contact their local MP and ask the right questions. And they can even forward this video. I mean, it's that simple.
So basically what we're telling the world is that the government would have us believe that the government has no money left. Now that is a fraud, because the government have allowed the central bank to be dissociated from the government and to be run by private interests. And when we reveal on a daily basis that those private interests are union leaders like David Prentice, who's imposed the 5-year pay freeze on his membership, gets a 6-figure salary and a 6-figure pension, and they are also fraudsters like the CEO at Bill Gamel's company Cairn. Gamel's been forced into resignation. Prime Minister Singh in India has been forced into resignation because of the fraudulent stock market trading in a company which has no product since its inception. At 50 Lothian Road they have 3,000 or 2,700 Ponzi shells of that same busted, pathetic company, which is cheating investors, cheating savers. And when the investor is a pension fund like the British Telecom Pension Fund, it's able to access investments in a toxic debt pool, which is the HBOS and the Lloyds TSB debt pool, who are the directors at one of BT Telecom's pension funds. It has 3 different subsidiaries so that they can pretend to be lucrative and well off one day, and then when you read about their new schemes on giving almost all of the pension as a lump sum up front, I forget what they call it, but I'll soon be able to relay that to you because I learned about it only this morning. So do you want to tell them a little bit about Katie Bourne and how she's risen to power and what her background was? She was also a local councillor, earning something like, how much? Kate, hello?
Yeah.
Katie Bourne, how much would a local councillor in your region earn? In my region they only get 17 to 19 grand.
Yeah, I haven't got that at the moment, George.
So, and we don't have police commissioners, because in Scotland Stephen House does the whole job himself for a £250,000 salary, same week as he got his knighthood. Yeah, same week as he launched the investigation of that child killing I talked about yesterday with Moira Anderson. And what we have instead is a man called Kenny McCaskill. He's the police commissioner, elected as an MSP, a member of Mr. Salmon's cabinet, who are gonna lose the referendum according to the statistics that were released at my agricultural fair yesterday. And when they realise that they're going to lose the referendum, they begin talking to honest men about the other lot's fraud. So I got a lot of new fans yesterday from the SNP, who are only polling 40% of the vote in the opinion polls. The other lot, who are the criminals, and we have all their director numbers, as you know,
yeah,
they're polling at 60%. Because if they lose, the Westminster MPs are jobless. You might have noticed that that is a conflict of interest in the campaign.
Exactly.
That the campaigners for Better Off Together, who we know are multinational fraudsters and war criminals, particularly in the cabinet office level, and those that have resigned from the cabinet or been booted out in recent times, yeah, the SNP realise they're on a loser, and that it's going to take a courageous gesture to free their country. But I've told them that I'm already making that gesture, and that my services as an expose of the massive frauds that Gordon Bowden, myself and yourself talk about now, and their locations and the explicit involvement of people that have led our nation for 40 years using money laundering from boiler rooms in Finchley, in Bristol, in Leeds, in Liverpool, all over our impoverished country. And all of those who have titles like Baroness, Sir, yeah, they're the Black Knights. They're the people that are doing the dirty against the citizens, and the methods that we portray are as plain as the nose on your face. So when I write up the stuff about what's the name of the woman who's the regulator, Zoe Billingham, yeah, and I was quite shocked when you told me that Zoe is connected to a socialist of the magnitude and the fame of the Beast of Bolsover, Dennis Skinner. That's our grandpa. What you're telling me that that's published in Wikipedia. I have not seen that for sure.
He's married to Dennis Skinner.
But that's exactly how the union leader, in the year that the student fees were increased from £3,000 to £9,000. I will not reveal the name of the student union leader that year, but he was an alumnus of Heriot-Watt University, where I came from.
Yep.
He was a recipient of all of my emails on all of the frauds, all of the war crimes, and all of the economic scams. When he appeared on Radio 4, he just licked the Vice-Chancellor's arse.
Of course.
That's the same year as they raised the fees from £3,000 to £9,000 to take the debt burden for an honours degree up to between £40,000 and £50,000. That's a life in debt for all British students. Yeah, and that's how the union leaders work now. They're picked for their sins, they're picked for their six-figure salary. If somebody reveals it, like McCluskey's on the Public Policy Institute, then the union leader gets the blame, but the whole of the court of the Bank of England, led by a Canadian who gets an £800,000 salary, he's got something like a 6 to 8 years in office with no election, just an appointment by the previous office holder, who was Mervyn King, and is completely unprepared to regulate the commitments of the Bank of England as they continue to lend to democracy at massive rates of interest, and they run the sovereign debt scams which have run Spain, Portugal, Iceland, Italy into the ground and imposed austerity on all of their local citizens. The elites get richer and richer, and it is really dangerous for them now, because the truth about their methodologies and their massive crimes and their massive geopolitical manipulation is coming pouring out. So the local police, all you need to do is to start talking to people like me and Gordon Bowden and John Patterson about what's happened to your salary and why you have to bail out at 50 and why you'll be unable to feed yourself on the pension that they will give you, and why G4S are already displacing you at the Social Security Office, at the sporting event, and outside the Royal Bank of Scotland in George Square, where they run the British Telecom pension service from. It's in a massive toxic debt pool, and everybody thinks that everything's okay as long as they're in work. You just need to start exposing to your local MP that you know all about his crimes and how it's impacting on your family. Is that enough on that one, John?
It is, George, and I just hope people take this advice.
Yeah, well, it takes a bit of courage, but you and I have nothing left. I have no right to work.
No.
I'm getting convicted on petty charges by people that were the most trusted people in my life. Yeah. And that's how petty it is. They will take the bun to desert the common man as soon as the bung is laid on the bar top or on the coffin in the lodge or whatever they do in the lodge. I've never been privy to that, but the policemen think it's really clever to have a joke about, you know, something that they've done locally that is a little bit dishonest, that gets them a few dollars. But what's happening to the whole of the British Police Service is those scams are now... Zoe Billingham used to work in the Cabinet Office. Yet they're being defrauded of their income and their future pension, which I think that... I'm not sure what the... physically, when you have to retire as a police person, I don't know when, you know, when you're incapable of picking up the baton anymore, and whether there's an age band at which you're bound to retire. But what was described by me by that local police person was that, you know, as soon as they can get out, they're out, because they're nervous wrecks and they're physically exhausted by the job that they have to do at the moment and the terms and conditions. But the armies of bureaucrats that have been elected and imposed to suck up that funding and to launder it into different countries and private interests through the Billingham family and the elected commissioners. I'm not saying that they're launderers, I have no evidence for that, I've not looked in any detail, I've just looked at the salaries they draw down and the bureaucratic nature of the job they do. They're not there for law enforcement, they're there, you know, to look into the, you know, the health and safety roster and whether or not everybody's covering their butt at the annual progress review, you know, whether it's a two-way process. It's just box ticking that gets you 70 to 100,000 pounds and a team of 7 or 8 people to do the same box ticking job at the same time as the police jobs tumble and the budget for all public sector initiatives, including the NHS, nursing, doctors, all of it is being run down by the same vicious people that are operating out of the Cabinet Office and previous regimes, and there is no difference at all between the Labour that we have now and the Conservatives and the Lib Devs we have now. All of them are picked for their sins and their capacity to make the wrong decision because of the issues that you understand, because you're an able danger member and you understand coercion and how it works. Yeah, they're all backed into a corner so that when they get the call from the Rothschilds to do the wrong thing or to impose the tax on breathing, they'll just do it.
Exactly.
They get the trickle down and it is massive.
George, did you want to round this up to 30 minutes?
Yeah, we'll stop there, shall we?
This is good.
Yeah.
I'll speak to you soon, George.
Cheers, John.
Take care. Bye.